Well, to support or to slash, that is the question, at least when it comes to funding. President Obama has now submitted his blueprint for the federal budget, one illustration of the White House priorities in terms of money. Well, in case you haven't heard, the total budget amount is $3.73 trillion. I don't know about you, but anything over a few $100 billion and I'm lost. So we wanted to help get a better grasp on what this all means. If you stack $3.73 trillion $1 bills on top of each other, it would be as tall as 2,408,258 Washington monuments. With the same amount, you could give $12,000 to every single American. Or if you'd rather invest that money, you could buy Facebook 74 times and Twitter 373 times. All right, but what does this actually mean? Gerald Celente is the publisher of the Trends Journal and the director of the Trends Research Institute. He's in Kingston, New York. And Gerald, let's start where any conversation about money should start, with the numbers. President Obama wants to spend nearly $3.5 trillion, while the tax revenues to come in are projected at about $2 trillion, excuse me. Therefore, creating a deficit of $1.5 trillion. Should Americans be concerned about this math?
Of course they should. They should have been concerned a long time ago. Let's go back to Obama in 2009, when you had some of that change you could believe in. How's this for some small change? They said that now, according to the Congressional Budget Office, that in 2011, we'd have a budget deficit of $500 billion. They were only $1 trillion off. And then go back to Obama back in 2009. He said that he was going to scour the federal budget and he could find $2 trillion in savings. They're bankrupting the country. It's as simple as that. It's all a lie and a scam. If you go back to what they said and what is, you can see the future. It's going to be more of the same, putting the country deeper in debt and putting the burden of the debt on the shoulders of the American people.
Well, it's a little frightening, too. I mean, just staying with these idea of numbers not adding up. I mean, the U.S. federal debt this year will top $15 trillion, officially equaling the size of the entire U.S. economy. It just sounds a little frightening.
It is frightening. Everybody should be concerned. By the way, that's why I love it. In the United States, there's no inflation. People, cost of living increases, retirees, they didn't get anything. They say there's no inflation. Inflation is raging worldwide. We just saw the numbers coming in from the UK, over 4%. You go to China. Part of this is happening because the United States is devaluing its currency. They're flooding the world market with cheap dollars and driving up the prices of everything. People should be very concerned. And here's something else, Christine, that people should be aware of, is that, they're talking about budget cuts. How about the trillions of dollars that were funneled into those great too-big-to-fail banks and financial institutions? So what they're doing is they're taking the money from the people and giving it to the too bigs.
But the fact is, when this budget was put out, the president's budget, there are spending cuts, $40 to $60 billion, and everything is on the table, from removing tax breaks for oil and gas companies to cutting heating assistance for poor people. I mean, where do you think deeper cuts should have and could have been made? I mean, you mentioned these too-big-to-fail banks. They've paid back. Where's next?
Well, they really haven't paid back. They got, they got money to keep going out there and doing their schemes and making more money. But let's look at the cuts. They're talking about cutting defense. $15 billion a year, accounting for inflation. That's not cutting defense. We're looking at, and then how about that wonderful intelligence budget of about $80 billion? And boy, are they doing a great job. I just heard the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mullins, say on The Daily Show to a comic that no one saw the crises coming in Tunisia and Egypt. There's plenty of money to cut, but they're only cutting. Look, they're talking about cutting home heating oil assistance, $2.5 billion. That's like cutting a week out of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. So the sacred cows aren't being touched. It's only a cut for, and the Environmental Protection Agency. What are they talking about, cutting a third out of that, 30%? Yeah, here's some more change you could believe in for all those liberals that believe Obama's on their side.
You know, I want to stay with this topic now that you're talking about the military. The U.S., as we know, spends more than 50% of what the entire world spends on military. Why is cutting military spending in this realm so rarely on the table? I mean, you mentioned a couple different things, and I know we're in at least 1.5 wars in the Middle East, but this country also occupies nearly 1,000 non-threatening countries. What about scaling back there? Why do you think this hasn't been discussed?
It's because of what President Dwight D. Eisenhower, a 5-star general, the supreme commander of the Allied forces during World War II, 2-term Republican president. It's as simple as the handwriting on the wall. It's called the military-industrial complex is in charge of the nation. They have us, as you mentioned, in those bases and in 1.5 wars. How about almost 2? You're forgetting Pakistan, where the CIA now has its own fleet of drones that goes in there on virtually a weekly basis. So the military is off limits. And that's where the budget cuts should really be coming from.
The president also getting a lot of flack for not really talking about some of the largest entitlement programs. We're talking about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, but these are programs heavily relied on by a lot of Americans. What about, you know, that sort of tightrope that the president has to walk on?
Well, Medicare and Medicaid are huge problems, but the huge problem is America spends more on health care than virtually any other nation per person. But look at the health of the nation. It's only going to get worse. I mean, you know, go to Walmart. It's like going to a grade B horror movie when you see what the people look like in this country. So they're overfed, junk food fed, and you know, kids getting type 2 diabetes. You know, that's never happened before. So these problems are only going to get worse because the fundamentals are worse, and that is the health of the nation, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So cutting back, adding more is not going to make any difference. As the baby boom population ages, the crisis is only going to continue to worsen. And as for Social Security, I mean, that's the people's money. We're putting it in there to get it back. And what are they going to do, raise the retirement age? How about raising it until after you die? Then you could collect a lot.
Always good ideas out there. Gerald Celente, publisher of the Trends Journal and director of the Trends Research Institute.